My name is Goran Olsen, and what I'm about to share with you changed my life forever. Before I tell you about the incredible revelations Jesus showed me about what the dead are doing right now, I need you to understand that every word of this testimony is true. What happened to me wasn't just a dream or a hallucination. It was more real than anything I've ever experienced in my earthly life. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in September when everything changed. I was driving to work, just like I had done thousands of times before. The autumn leaves were starting to turn, and I remember thinking about how I needed to rake my yard that weekend. That's the last normal thought I had before everything went black. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. Later, I learned that a drunk driver had run a red light and T-boned my car at 65 miles per hour. The impact was so severe that my car flipped 3 times before coming to rest on its roof. The first responders would later tell my family that they didn't expect to find anyone alive in the wreckage. They were right. Technically, I wasn't alive. I was pronounced dead at the scene. But what happened during those 27 minutes when my heart stopped beating is what I need to share with you today. What Jesus revealed to me about the activities of those who have passed on isn't just shocking. It will transform how you understand both life and death. When the moment of impact came, everything went dark. But then, suddenly, I was awake, more awake than I had ever been. The pain was gone, and I felt lighter than air. I found myself floating above my crushed car, watching as paramedics worked frantically on my broken body below. I could hear every word they said with perfect clarity, even though I was at least 15 feet above them. "No pulse," one paramedic said, his voice tight with urgency. "Starting compressions." I wanted to tell them I was fine, that they didn't need to worry about me, but I couldn't speak. That's when I noticed the light. It started as a pinpoint in the distance, like a star in the night sky, but it quickly grew brighter and larger. This light was unlike anything on earth. It was pure, warm, and filled with more love than I can possibly describe. I felt myself being drawn toward it, moving through what seemed like a tunnel of swirling colors and patterns. But this wasn't like the cliché tunnels you hear about in other near-death experiences. This tunnel was alive with purpose, and I could sense thousands of presences around me, all moving with divine intention. As I traveled through this space, I began to hear what sounded like countless voices singing in perfect harmony. The melody was both familiar and completely new, like something I had always known but had somehow forgotten. The music seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound was so beautiful and pure that it filled every part of my being. I felt as if I was being bathed in the most profound peace, something I had never experienced on earth. Then, suddenly, I was there. The best way I can describe there is to imagine stepping into pure, radiant light that doesn't blind you but somehow fills you with a sense of awe and wonder. It was as if the light was alive, yet gentle enough not to overwhelm. And in that light stood Jesus Christ himself. His presence was beyond anything I could have imagined. I could feel his love, immense, infinite, and unconditional. A love that reached into the deepest corners of my soul. The light that radiated from him wasn't just light. It was life itself, vibrating with energy, warmth, and vitality. It enveloped me completely, surrounding me in a way that transcended anything I had ever known. It wasn't the kind of light that you experience in the world around you. This was something different, something divine. It felt as though the very essence of life was emanating from him. And as it touched me, I felt whole. Like every fiber of my being was being healed and restored. I stood there before Jesus, and I could feel the weight of his gaze. Though he had not yet spoken, his eyes were deep, filled with love and understanding. Yet there was a strength in them that held an entire universe of wisdom and compassion. There were no words at first. But in that silence, I knew he was communicating with me on a level that went beyond language. It was as though his presence alone was enough to convey everything: his love, his purpose, his will for all creation. It was a deep, unspoken connection. As I stood in his presence, I could sense that he was showing me things beyond the physical world, things that transcended time and space. I could feel a profound understanding filling me, as if I were being shown the very fabric of existence, the interconnectedness of all life, the divine order behind everything. I knew without a doubt that I was in the presence of the Creator of the universe, the one who had designed everything with such love and purpose. Yet, despite the immense power and majesty of his presence, I felt completely at peace, completely safe, and completely loved. I had no fear, no anxiety, just an overwhelming sense of belonging, as if I had always been meant to stand before him in this moment. Jesus spoke to me, not with words, but with a knowing that penetrated to the deepest part of my soul. He showed me glimpses of what the dead are doing right now, what happens when we pass from this world. I saw the incredible work that is happening in the spiritual realm, work that we, on earth, often overlook or fail to understand. The dead are not idle. They are active. They are engaged. And they are working alongside angels, assisting in the divine plan for humanity. I learned that those who have passed are not just waiting in some far-off place, disconnected from the world they left behind. They are part of a greater, cosmic system, a system that continues to affect us in ways we cannot fully comprehend. The dead, I saw, are involved in our lives, guiding us, praying for us, and working to help us fulfill our purpose. They are not separate from us. They are part of the ongoing process of life, death, and rebirth, all under the direction of God's divine will. But perhaps the most profound realization I had was that death is not the end. It is a transition, a continuation of a journey. The love and light that surrounds us in this life does not cease when we pass from this world. In fact, it intensifies. What I saw in that moment, what Jesus showed me, was the overwhelming, never-ending love of God. A love that does not stop, does not fade, and will never let go. As I stood there, feeling the presence of Jesus and the vastness of the divine plan, I realized that life and death are more intertwined than we can imagine. There is no separation between the two. Death is not a final end but a continuation of the journey we all take. A journey that is guided by divine love and purpose. Then, as quickly as it had begun, I felt myself being drawn back. The light began to fade, and I could sense my earthly body once again. The transition was jarring, and I felt the heaviness of returning to the physical world. But it was also necessary. My time was not yet finished. I gasped awake in the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and concerned faces. I had been clinically dead for 27 minutes. The doctors called my recovery miraculous. And now I understand why. It wasn't just a medical miracle. It was the hand of God, the work of Jesus, and the love of the angels that brought me back. And I am here today to share this message, that life, death, and the afterlife are far more interconnected than we understand. And the love of God is always with us, guiding us, even beyond the veil. I recognized him immediately, not because he matched any painting or image I'd ever seen, but because every cell in my being knew him as my Creator and Savior. His presence was overwhelming, not in a frightening way, but in the way that standing before an ocean makes you realize how small you are, while simultaneously making you feel completely safe and at peace. His eyes held more love than I thought possible to exist, and when he smiled at me, I felt every question I'd ever had about my worth answered in an instant. "Welcome, Goran," he said, and his voice resonated through my entire being. It wasn't just a sound I heard, it was a feeling, a knowing, that passed through every part of me. There is much you need to see. What happened next is what I've been instructed to share with the world. Jesus began to show me what the souls of the departed are actually doing right now. And it's nothing like what most people imagine. He gestured. And suddenly, we were observing what I can only describe as a vast spiritual realm. I saw countless souls engaged in what Jesus explained was the great work of heaven. This wasn't the passive, cloud-sitting existence many people imagine. Instead, I witnessed souls actively participating in God's ongoing work of redemption and creation. Watch carefully, Jesus said, directing my attention to different scenes. Each soul here has a divine purpose they are fulfilling. I saw groups of souls engaged in what appeared to be intercession for those still on earth. They were somehow aware of specific struggles and challenges facing their loved ones, and even strangers. They were actively praying and working in ways that affected the physical world, though not in the way many might assume. They didn't hover around their families or haunt their old homes, as common misconceptions suggest. Instead, their work was much more important and far-reaching. Souls here are part of a divine plan, Jesus explained. They work to assist, to guide, and to help shape events on earth, but always in harmony with the free will of those still living. I witnessed souls helping to guide other recently departed spirits. Much like spiritual mentors, these souls weren't lost or confused. They were leading others in their transition, providing wisdom and comfort. I saw how deeply interconnected the lives of the living and the departed are. How the work of the departed extends beyond themselves, reaching out to assist those still on earth and those crossing over. Others were engaged in what appeared to be vast educational experiences. These souls were learning deeper truths about God's creation, His plans, and the mysteries of the universe that they hadn't fully understood during their earthly lives. The learning was not passive or static. It was dynamic, filled with discovery, and it gave me a glimpse of how God's plan unfolds in ways we can't fully comprehend. Some souls were participating in what Jesus described as the preparation of the new heaven and the new earth. They were involved in the creative work that is shaping the world to come, work that is essential in the fulfillment of God's divine purpose. What struck me most was how organized and purposeful everything was. This wasn't a place of eternal rest in the sense of inactivity. It was a realm of joyful, meaningful work and service to God's kingdom. The spirits weren't aimlessly waiting. They were active participants in the unfolding of creation. Jesus then showed me something that particularly surprised me. I saw souls who were actively participating in what he called the great chorus of creation. They were part of a vast harmony that somehow helped maintain the very fabric of reality itself. Their worship wasn't just singing, it was an essential part of how God's universe functions. It was as if the music they created wasn't just a form of praise, it was woven into the very structure of existence, sustaining the cosmos in ways that our earthly minds can scarcely fathom. Many on earth think of heaven as an ending, Jesus said, his voice filled with quiet strength. But it's actually a beginning. What you're seeing is the active participation in God's ongoing work of redemption and creation. Heaven isn't a place where souls just sit and wait. It's a place where they continue their divine work, fulfilling the purposes they began on earth, and discovering new ways to serve in God's plan. The vastness of this revelation was staggering. The afterlife wasn't a place of idle existence, as many imagine, but a dynamic realm of active participation, where souls were continuing their growth, guiding others, and contributing to the ongoing work of God. Each soul had a purpose, a role to play, and they were carrying it out with the same dedication and love that they had shown in their earthly lives. I could feel the harmony in the air, the immense unity of purpose that connected everything in that realm. The souls weren't just waiting for a reward. They were actively involved in the creation of something beautiful, something eternal. Their joy wasn't just in the result, but in the act of creating, of contributing to a greater purpose. I realized that in this realm, there was no end, only a continuous, evolving journey in service to God. Jesus looked at me, his gaze full of compassion and wisdom. This is the work that continues beyond the grave. Every soul, whether alive or departed, plays a part in my creation. There is no separation in my kingdom, only a continued unfolding of love and purpose. As I took all of this in, I felt a profound peace settle over me, knowing that death is not an end, but a transition into a new, more active, and purposeful existence. I saw that death is not something to fear, but something to embrace, for it leads to a greater role in God's eternal plan. He then showed me something that broke my heart. Souls who had recently arrived in heaven but were having difficulty accepting their new reality because their loved ones on earth were trapped in excessive grief. "Watch," Jesus said, directing my attention to a particular scene. I saw a woman who had recently passed away. She was beautiful, radiant with heaven's light, but she kept looking back toward earth with concern. Her expression was one of distress, and I could feel the heaviness of her sorrow. Jesus explained that her family's inability to move forward with their lives was causing her distress. Even in heaven, they think they honor her memory with their endless grief, he said, but they don't understand that she has important work to do here. Her family's refusal to accept God's timing and plan created a kind of spiritual static, Jesus explained, making her transition more difficult. It was a profound revelation that pierced my soul. Our grieving on earth, when it becomes excessive and consuming, can actually impact our loved ones' heavenly assignments. This doesn't mean we shouldn't grieve, but there's a difference between healthy mourning and the kind of grief that refuses to accept God's will. I began to understand that when we cling too tightly to the past and refuse to move forward, it can create an emotional and spiritual burden, not just for us, but for those who have passed on. Grief is a natural part of love and loss, but we must learn to grieve in a way that allows both us and our loved ones to heal, rather than holding them in a place of spiritual limbo. Then Jesus showed me something even more shocking: how the prayers of people on earth interact with the work being done in heaven. I saw what looked like streams of light rising from earth, joining with the activities of the souls in heaven in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. Every sincere prayer, Jesus explained, becomes part of the great work being done in heaven. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost, he said. I saw how souls in heaven could see the bigger picture of God's plan in ways we on earth cannot. They understand why certain prayers are answered differently than expected, and they work to help channel God's grace in ways that serve His ultimate purposes. The prayers of the living are not just heard, they are integrated into the ongoing divine plan, helping to guide, shape, and support the work of God in ways beyond our understanding. This is why it's so important for those on earth to understand. Jesus continued, their loved ones aren't gone, they've been promoted. They're doing essential work in my kingdom. I was then shown something that made me gasp: the actual mechanics of how heaven and earth interact. It was like seeing behind the scenes of reality itself. I watched as angels and departed souls worked in perfect harmony, carrying out God's instructions with joy and precision. The level of coordination, the unity of purpose, was awe-inspiring. What amazed me most was how active and dynamic everything was. This wasn't a place of passive eternal rest. It was a realm of purpose, growth, and continuous praise. Here is a longer, expanded version of the passage you provided, adding more depth and detail to the soul's purpose in heaven, and Jesus' concern regarding misconceptions about the afterlife. Every soul in heaven had a role, a divine purpose that contributed to God's grand design. Heaven wasn't a place of passive waiting but an active realm where souls joyfully served God's kingdom. Their work had only just begun, continuing the tasks they began on earth, now fully realized in eternity. Each soul was aligned with God's will, and their work brought them joy, fulfillment, and a sense of eternal purpose. But then Jesus showed me something that deeply concerned him: the way many on earth were being deceived about the afterlife. Many are being led astray, he said. They seek to contact the dead through forbidden means, not understanding that the souls here are engaged in my work, not waiting to be summoned by the living. Jesus explained that the souls in heaven weren't lingering or restless spirits. They were actively participating in God's divine plan, fulfilling tasks assigned to them with joy and dedication. He cautioned that trying to communicate with the dead through mediums or occult practices only opened doors to deception and led people further from God's truth. Souls in heaven are not out of reach, he continued. They are here with me, serving in ways you cannot understand. Their purpose is to serve God, not to be summoned by the living. He showed me how these attempts to communicate with the dead through mediums and psychics actually open doors to deception from dark spiritual forces. The souls in heaven, he explained, communicate with the living only in ways he specifically authorizes and always in accordance with his will and word. He made it clear that such practices were not only misguided, but dangerous. Tell them, Jesus instructed me, that their loved ones are not floating aimlessly in some spiritual realm. They are here with me, engaged in work more meaningful than anything they did on earth. I was then shown how the souls in heaven maintain their individual personalities while being perfected in Christ. Heaven wasn't a place where souls lost their identities or became indistinguishable from one another. Each soul retained its unique qualities, memories, and characteristics. However, these personalities were being gradually refined and perfected by Christ's love and grace. While they remained themselves, they were still learning, growing, and becoming more aligned with God's perfect will. Heaven was not just a place of rest, but of continuous growth and transformation. The flaws and imperfections from their earthly lives were being purified, and their distinct identities were celebrated in heaven, now fully refined to reflect God's divine plan. These souls didn't lose their uniqueness, but instead became more of who they were meant to be, free from sin and imperfection. They were becoming the best versions of themselves, fully embracing their role in God's greater purpose, and reflecting the perfect image of God in a way only they could. It was a humbling and beautiful revelation. I saw that heaven isn't a place where souls are absorbed into nothingness. Instead, it is a place of active, ongoing transformation. The souls in heaven are not static or passive, they are dynamic, continuing to grow, to serve, and to fulfill the roles they were meant to play in God's grand design. The entire experience filled me with awe and a profound understanding of the afterlife, one that is vastly different from what many believe. Heaven is not a place of endless rest, it is a realm of ongoing work, growth, and purposeful existence. The souls of the departed are not lost or floating in a void. They are working, evolving, and fulfilling the roles assigned to them by God, contributing to the eternal plan of redemption and creation. In heaven, souls do not lose their individuality or become indistinct beings. Rather, they become more fully themselves than ever before. Free from the burdens of sin and limitation, they embrace their true nature. Jesus showed me that souls in heaven are aware of time passing on earth, but their experience of time is fundamentally different. While they are not constrained by the linear, earthly understanding of time, they can still perceive and track events on earth that relate to their heavenly work. Many people on earth worry that their loved ones, once departed, are missing out on important moments. But Jesus explained that they don't realize that those in heaven experience time from an eternal viewpoint. Nothing is truly lost or overlooked, it is simply experienced differently. I witnessed souls celebrating earthly milestones with immense joy, but not in the way we might envision. Their involvement in earthly events was always in perfect alignment with God's will, seamlessly contributing to His divine purposes. Then, Jesus revealed something that deeply touched me: how the prayers and worship of people on earth create what He called windows of glory, which allow heaven's reality to touch earth in remarkable ways. I saw how these moments of sincere worship and prayer formed supernatural connections between the two realms. This is why collective worship is so vital. Jesus explained, When His people come together to praise Him, they create opportunities for heaven's influence to reach earth in powerful ways. Jesus showed me that the souls in heaven sometimes join in these moments of worship, their prayers blending with those of the church on earth. Their participation strengthens the very fabric of reality itself. I felt the unity and power of these heavenly and earthly connections as they forged a deeper bond between the realms. As our journey continued, Jesus showed me how souls in heaven contribute to what He called the Great Preparation. I witnessed countless souls working on aspects of the new heaven and the new earth. Though much of what I saw was too magnificent to fully grasp or describe in human terms, every soul in heaven understands their role in God's plan. Jesus explained, "There is no confusion, no competition, no jealousy, only perfect joy in fulfilling God's purposes." I saw how each soul had a specific assignment, perfectly tailored to who they had become through their earthly lives and the transformation they underwent in heaven. Some were engaged in what appeared to be cosmic architecture, shaping the new creation, while others were preparing welcoming spaces for souls yet to arrive. Then Jesus addressed another misconception that many have about heaven. Many on earth believe heaven is about receiving rewards and resting. He said, "While there are indeed rewards and rest in me, the greatest joy in heaven is found in participating in my ongoing work of creation and redemption." He showed me how the souls in heaven find perfect fulfillment in their tasks, free from the frustrations and limitations that often accompany work on earth. Each assignment they undertake is an opportunity to express love for God and take part in His divine purposes. I witnessed how the souls in heaven maintain an unwavering awareness of God's presence as they carry out their assignments. Unlike on earth, where we can become so absorbed in our work that we forget to remain connected to God, these souls perform their duties in a constant state of worship and communion with Him. Their work is never separate from their relationship with God, it is an extension of that relationship. Then Jesus showed me something that particularly surprised me, how the prayers of Christians on earth for the lost create opportunities for heaven's influence to touch those souls in special ways. I saw how these prayers were like streams of light, directed by the souls in heaven toward their intended recipients. This is why persistent prayer is so important, Jesus explained. It creates channels through which my grace can flow more freely. He showed me how the souls in heaven rejoice whenever someone on earth turns to Christ, and how they take part in what He called the Great Celebration, whenever a lost soul is saved. As our time together continued, Jesus revealed how the souls in heaven maintain perfect balance between their individual tasks and their corporate worship. Unlike on earth, where we often struggle to balance work and worship, these souls experience their work as worship and their worship as work. "This is what I designed humanity for," Jesus explained, perfect unity between purpose and praise. I witnessed how souls in heaven never experience boredom or fatigue. Their joy in their tasks never fades, and their ability to engage in God's divine plan never wanes. Jesus then showed me something deeply moving, how the souls in heaven pray for and encourage each other in their various assignments. Even though they experience no sin or limitation, they still build each other up and celebrate each other's participation in God's work. "This is perfect community," Jesus said. "What my church on earth strives for. These souls experience in its fullness." I saw how souls who had known each other on earth continued to work together in heaven. Their earthly relationships had been transformed and perfected by God's love. But I also saw beautiful collaborations between souls who had lived in different times and places on earth. Jesus showed me how the souls in heaven have perfect understanding of how their earthly lives prepared them for their heavenly assignments. Every trial, every joy, every experience was woven into their eternal purpose, displaying God's perfect wisdom. "Nothing is wasted," Jesus said. "Every moment of earthly life has eternal significance." He showed me how souls who had suffered greatly on earth now understood the divine purpose behind their trials. Their heavenly assignments often involve using their experiences to channel God's comfort to those still suffering on earth. As our time together drew to a close, Jesus gave me specific instructions about sharing what I had seen. "Tell them," he said, "that their loved ones are not lost, not floating in space, not sleeping until the resurrection. They are actively engaged in my kingdom's work, experiencing joy beyond human description." He emphasized that while souls in heaven are aware of earth, they view earthly events from heaven's perspective. Their concern is not for temporary earthly matters, but for the eternal consequences of earthly choices. "Tell them to live with heaven in mind," Jesus instructed. "The choices they make on earth have eternal implications. Every act of obedience, every choice to trust me, prepares them for their eternal assignment." Just before sending me back, Jesus showed me one final scene, a glimpse of the future moment when heaven and earth will be united. The glory of what I saw was beyond my ability to describe, but it filled me with an unshakable hope and purpose. "Remember," Jesus said, "what you've seen is only a small part of what I have prepared for those who love me. The greatest wonders are yet to come." With those words, I felt myself being drawn back through the tunnel of light. Suddenly, I became aware of intense pain and the sounds of medical equipment. I heard voices saying, "She's back! We've got a pulse!" When I opened my eyes, I was in an ambulance, surrounded by paramedics. They later told me they had never seen anyone return after being dead for so long. The doctors called my recovery miraculous, and it was. But the real miracle was what I had seen and learned during those 27 minutes. Since that day, my understanding of death, heaven, and the afterlife has been completely transformed. I no longer fear death. I understand that God has left me here for a purpose, to share what I've seen and help others understand the glorious reality that awaits those who love Jesus. When people ask me if I was afraid to die, I tell them the truth. The only thing that scares me now is the thought of people living their lives without understanding what I've seen. Every soul on earth needs to know that heaven is not a place of passive rest but a realm of purpose, joy, and active participation in God's ongoing work. Heaven is not distant or idle. It is filled with purpose, and our earthly lives are preparing us for it. I hope this testimony brings comfort to those grieving and inspires those still seeking their purpose. Live with heaven in mind. Every moment is preparation for your eternal assignment. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. And the work being done there is more amazing than we can imagine. Our loved ones aren't gone. They've simply been promoted to higher service. One day, we will join them in that glorious work. My experience has taught me that, while we should certainly grieve the loss of our loved ones, we can do so with hope, knowing they are not lost, sleeping, or floating aimlessly. They are more alive than ever, engaged in work more meaningful than anything we can imagine on earth. As I share this testimony, I pray that it brings comfort to those who have lost loved ones and inspiration to those who are still seeking their purpose. Remember, every moment of your life is preparation for your eternal assignment. Live with that knowledge, and let it transform how you view both life and death. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. And the work being done there is more amazing than anything we can imagine. Our loved ones aren't gone. They've simply been promoted to higher service in God's kingdom. One day, if we remain faithful to Christ, we will join them in that glorious work. This is the truth about what the dead are doing now. They are very much alive, serving God with joy and purpose in ways that will amaze us when we finally see it for ourselves. Until then, let us live with heaven in mind, knowing that our lives on earth are preparation for the eternal purposes God has designed for each of us. Remember, Jesus said, "The greatest wonders are yet to come." Live in that hope, and let it transform everything about how you view both this life and the next. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.